All right, ladies and gents, welcome back for another video. So today I am joined by Mr. Lee Freeman. Lee Freeman is the founder of Tab in Florence and Myrtle Beach. And we're going to be doing something pretty interesting today, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. We're gonna pull open the curtain and see what's behind the wonderful behaviors and motivations of Colden Blades. What makes them tick, and but it's going to be great. I think you're going to get a lot from it. Part of what we're going to do today is debrief a DISC assessment, which many folks are familiar with, but I will kind of catch you up on that, and then also an assessment of what your motivators, your driving forces are. And but there's basically three goals with anybody that I do. Number one, to succeed in business, and it's all the behavioral research suggests that basically the most effective people really understand themselves first. And so the goal today is help you become more self-aware, because then you can identify strengths or weaknesses or things you want to develop professionally and personally. And the other thing too is to realize that there's other types of communication styles out there, and so that your communication will be more effective, and so if we accomplish those three things today, then we'll have had a good time.
Awesome. Well, let's draw back the curtain and dive on in.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into the fun part. Any questions that you have before we start on this?
I am very much ready to follow your lead on this.
Okay. All right.
As I told you before, I have read through the report, just a quick look over it. But I'm looking forward to diving more in depth with you.
Well, and the fun thing that these are about your favorite subject yourself for most people. But anyway, and I know some challenge that. But let's look. The very first step is look at your overall behavioral characteristics. There's three paragraphs here. The first paragraph is really about you. The second paragraph is about how you make decisions. And the third paragraph is about how you communicate to others. So what I'm going to do is, for the sake of our podcast here, I'm going to read this paragraph while you look along with me. And generally, I ask folks two or three things. One is, how accurate do you think it is? 85, 90, 95, 100% accurate. Yep, that sounds like me. And if there's anything that really jumps out at you that, like, yeah, that is definitely me. And also, too, if there's something that, like, no, it doesn't sit right. It's like, no, I don't see myself that way. I don't think I'm like that. Then let's identify that. So let's jump right in and go this. So this is, all right, so I'm going to, Colden may lose interest in a project once the challenge ceases. He may then be ready for another challenging project. He is extremely results-oriented with a sense of urgency to complete projects quickly. He is deadline conscious and becomes irritated if deadlines are delayed or missed. He prefers an environment of variety and change. He is at his best when many projects are underway at once. Colden is a self-starter who likes new projects and is most comfortable when involved with a wide scope of activities. He is goal-oriented and driven by results. He is the team member who will try to keep others on task. He needs to learn to relax and pace himself. He may expend too much energy trying to control himself and others. He can be aggressive and direct, but still be considerate of people. Other people realize that directness is one of his great strengths. Colden likes to be forceful and direct when dealing with others. His desire for results is readily apparent to the people with whom he works. He's a goal-oriented individual who believes in harnessing people to achieve goals. He needs people with other strengths on his team. So that's about you. Would you think that's fair assessment? Fairly accurate.
I would say that's about spot on. Yeah.
Okay. Anything in particular that's like, okay, yeah, that's definitely me.
Results driven, hands down. A lot of what you just read off jumps out at me as myself needs to learn how to relax and pace himself. Mm-hmm. Will I ever? Probably not.
What's great about being aware of that is it's a real strength in what you do, your passion that you provide for your customers. The thing to realize with this is to be more patient with folks who do not work at that high pace or are driven at that level, because you need some of those around sometime.
Right.
to be that other voice. In other words, you'll get things done. Come a hurricane or not, you're going to get things done. But just that's good to know. So we're pretty on target there. So let's look at the next paragraph, which is about basically how you make decisions, or sort of what's behind that. Colden has the unique ability of tackling tough problems and following them through to a satisfactory conclusion. When faced with a tough decision, he will try to sell you on his ideas. He finds it easy to share his opinions on solving work-related problems. He will work long hours until a tough problem is solved. After it is solved, Colden may become bored with any routine work that follows. Colden has the ability to make high-risk decisions, but sometimes should seek counsel before acting. Sometimes he may be so opinionated about a particular problem that he has difficulty letting others participate in the process. He is a good problem solver and troubleshooter, always seeking new ways to solve old problems. He should realize that at times he needs to think a project through, beginning to end, before starting the project. Okay, is that an accurate,
Absolutely.
in your opinion? So you see where your strengths are there, and you also see where some things that could benefit you to get additional counsel and see. Now, I mean, I know personally in working with you, that's something you've been really doing and getting involved in your putting your business together and things for your clients and going forward. So, is there anything that doesn't think that you don't think relates to you or sounds like you, or maybe off?
I think I really resonate with probably 99% of it. All makes sense to me. The only one that maybe looks like it would need a little tweaking would be always seeking new ideas to solve old problems. Mm-hmm. I guess that does make sense, actually, now that I think about it.
Well, and you know what? You could translate that into he's an innovator.
That would make sense to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, pretty much spot on.
And always is a pretty broad word.
Yeah.
Maybe not always,
right.
But maybe a tendency.
Correct.
You have a tendency to do that.
Correct.
And you get enjoyment from it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But really looking at this and aligning it with what you do is you're in the right spot as far as these things that are part of your natural behavior and how you respond to your environment. So let's look at the last paragraph, which is about how you communicate. Colden should exhibit more patience and ask questions to make sure that others have understood what he has said. He's creative, and his creative and active mind may hinder his ability to communicate to others effectively. He may present the information in a form that cannot be easily understood by some people. He may lack the patience to listen and communicate with slower acting people. He tends to be intolerant of people who seem ambiguous or think too slowly. Colden likes people who give him options as compared to opinions. The options may help him make decisions, and he values his own opinion over that of others. He may sometimes mask his feelings in friendly terms. If pressured, Colden's true feelings may emerge. He challenges people who volunteer their opinions. He likes people who present their case effectively. When they do, he can then make a quicker assessment or decision. So there's a lot in that few sentences. So how does that sit with you?
That sits well with me. I definitely understand a lot of those as both strengths and weaknesses in different situations. Yeah. You know, it's funny to me as we're reading through this, a lot of it is really circumstantial. It's, what's the circumstance? Are you, because I can look at, it seems like being able to make decisions and have conversations without letting emotion dictate your response. I think that that's a strong suit in a lot of the business kind of a lot of the business conversations and environments that I'm in. But that's not always the best thing when you are speaking to a family member or a friend who's, maybe having a hard time with something. It's definitely something I am personally self-aware of at this time. And I just kind of, it's right here in black and white. It makes perfect sense to me, but I just have to be knowledgeable of it.
And I think it's the takeaway, because part of this, we want to be aware, but we also want to be able to apply it to the real world.
Yep.
Okay, so when you're deep in handling someone with a project, you probably have lots of questions that come naturally, technically oriented or about the other things. I do think that sometimes, it's just a note to be patient and ask questions to make sure that others understand what he said. You're going fast, you're moving fast, and often we think communication is taking place, but we've just kind of talked at each other.
Yeah.
You're a high D, and we're going to get into this a little bit more, what that high D means, and the rest of your numbers on this profile, and very, very, very driven people. And, what's wonderful about these assessments, too, is often in a work environment, if you're part of a team within an organization, you're working within that, and there may be some walls there that kind of keep that in check somewhat. As someone that owns their own business and brings other folks in, sometimes a lot of owners are high Ds, and sometimes they can kind of overwhelm and kind of, steamroll, so to speak, their way through, where it all is fine because they are the boss. But it's much better to realize, okay, there are times to where I need to double check, make sure my communications got through, stop and just listen. The number one thing that most high Ds could really improve on, and I am one myself, so I can and as this environment's truly helped me so much in doing the coaching, is really just listening more.
Yep.
And are confirming that they understood, and especially, do you see how with some of your technical things and owners you're dealing with, where this could be a challenge for?
Absolutely. I do also find interesting one, I guess, I don't even know if it's really a discrepancy, but I know for myself, and maybe it's because I am self-aware of this,
right,
and I've had some practice for some years now, but in a one-to-many circumstance, when I'm in a group setting,
right,
I tend to be one of, if not the quietest one in the room, and that's because I prefer to be vigilant, to observe, and to see. But the second that there is a mission at hand, especially within a tighter knit group, I certainly like to lead the charge in whatever direction that we're going.
And that's relevant. Your eye is over the center line, but it's not high. So that would make sense in that setting. But where a high eye is going to be the most talkative person in the room, have 100 stories about everything, and more really comfortable in that environment and energized by it. You're probably much more energized by one-to-one engagements than in a group.
Correct.
setting.
I would say one-to-one, or I'm leading the charge and the group is coming where we're going.
Very good. Well, that fits right into that. So, as we, for those listening, we'll be getting into more of what the numbers are on the exact profile, but as we go. But with the next part of that, value to the organization, you can kind of take a quick peek on that. And again, this is your organization as well, but certainly, competitive jumps out at me. I know you can relate to that within an organization and thinks big. Is there anything else in that part that jumps out to you?
Few dull moments.
That's really good.
Comes with being a competitor.
Yeah. So, you think about an organization, few dull moments. I guess we always need somebody in there, but it's like sometimes well, I'd like to have a few dull moments every now and then. But but again, that falls in line. But the next two parts are really critical, and this is what I usually spend some time with. And for organizations, I help them create a communication chart to where every person on the leadership team or every person on the staff, we kind of identify the top two ways they'd like to be communicated to and not to be communicated to. There's a list of 10 here. We won't read all 10 of these for the cast here, but as you're looking over them, these are ways based off of your profile that you would prefer to be communicated to. Pick 2 that you maybe resonate with you the most.
Be clear, specific, brief, and to the point. I really like people who are able to take what might have been a few sentences of them explaining something and just showcasing it in as few words as possible.
Excellent.
Understand my sporadic listening skills. This was something that was definitely a struggle and got me in plenty of trouble, whether or not I deserved it at a young age and in school. You know, I used to get calls home and things of that nature for, you know, not paying attention in class while I was always getting good grades. And so that's where the overlap never was. But the reality was it's not that I wasn't listening. I was listening in the way that I listen best. I even, you know, recall sometimes now as I'm getting a little older, I guess I do kind of enjoy my quiet time when I'm like reading a book or something sometimes. But a lot of times I remember go out in the living room and if I had a book or a chapter I had to read for school, I would read it in the living room where everything was going on and there was a bunch of noise and movement around me because for some reason within that chaos, I was able to focus my best. I just kind of lost myself in the chaos. So understanding my sporadic listening skills in the essence of it's not that I'm not listening.
Correct.
It's just I'm not willing to put everything else on hold just to let you know that I'm listening to you. I am listening and I do care. It's just I'm operating at a very high frequency, and for me it's very hard to just but I'm self-aware of that, and I've tried to get better.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. And the thing about what you see is so cool in this is when you know, within an organization or when things there, when you know that, all of a sudden the light bulb goes off where, okay, he's not really just not paying attention to me. He is, but now I understand where he's coming from, and it just helps everything to, again, for real communication to take place. You know, the reality is 70% of the people that we communicate to have a different, you know, even range in a disc profile than we are, and we communicate in our most natural style. So just being aware of that just helps things to be better. But that's also really good that you're that far ahead of understanding that. But it's really cool to me how you can answer these questions, and then this good meat of information comes out from it that you can take and use. Now this other one, sometimes folks have the easier time with it. Ways not to communicate to you, things that maybe frustrate you or aggravate you, and so. While you're looking over that, just for the sake of our audience, some of these others are way too, would be like be specific and leave nothing to chance, or provide time for fun and relaxing, or verify that the message was heard. Those are, just to give you an idea of the various things. So look through these ways not to communicate and see if there's a couple that jump out at you.
To immediately jump out at me. And first and foremost is number one on the list. Asking rhetorical questions or useless questions. That gets on my nerves like nobody's business. And I'm self-aware of it enough to where I don't snap anymore. Yeah. But that shit really gets on my nerves. Like when I propose something, like there's certain people that will, be like, "Oh, are you sure?" If I wasn't sure, I wouldn't have said it.
Right.
Right. And even if I'm not sure that's where we're going, that's what we're doing. Yeah. So definitely that, which goes along with being redundant, direct or order. I'm not bad with being told. I'm not bad with being told what to do in as far as executables or deliverables.
Right.
If there's a mission that we're trying to accomplish and someone else is looking after some objective within that mission, right, and they come to me and they say, hey, in order for us to accomplish the objective, which plays into the overhead mission that we're trying to accomplish here, we need this, 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 and this. Mm-hmm. I'm fantastic with that. But if someone comes into, I guess, more of the mission briefing room and wants to say, hey, like, this is what we're doing and you're going to do it, I struggle.
The wall goes, I mean, as they say down here in the South, you bow up.
Yeah. I guess I bow up
at first. And I will say one thing about high Ds often too. This is their first tendency is to often defend to criticism. They defend and deflect if they're being criticized on something, but often after it's processed, they're like, okay, you know what, they were right, and I'm good with that. But also too, you can be very direct with them, and it just rolls off their back. I mean, things don't,
Correct.
Where someone that might be a high C, any kind of criticism sometimes they take very, very personally, and where a high D would often just say, okay, that's fine, I forget about it and move on. But often that first reaction is to defend. But of those other, so between direct or order, what would you say? We highlighted the ask rhetorical questions or useless ones. What would be your second?
I would say ramble on or waste time.
Yeah.
Don't waste my most valuable resource.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that we can't get back.
And again, in the real world, how that might now, cause a high I may come and talk to you about something, but they'll think about this and there's a story, and they think about something and there's a story, which I can do that sometime. I think the thing to realize is to know how to, hey, man, that's great. I want to hear about that sometime. I really do. But let's go ahead and get back to whatever. And most of the time they're okay. It's just realizing that, all right, this is, instead of just sitting there and not communicating that and being frustrated and not really hearing anything they say because you're so frustrated that they are rambling on.
That's exactly right.
All right. So, and if you notice on this other page, we've got some communication tips. This is just like in general of the different types of folks that you'll be able to come across. And just for those that are listening, for time's sake, we're not doing it, but I generally give more details on kind of what a D, a I, and a S, and a C are and traits, and I'll leave that information with you. And we take it. This is a launching point because it's a lot to take in. So one thing I try to highlight in a debrief initial one is the perceptions on page 12 there. Okay. So this is the page that is always a really good one, important one, because it's about how you see yourself, but how others may actually see you, and you don't even realize it under moderate pressure or under extreme pressure. And so, basically you see yourself as pioneering, assertive, competitive, confident, positive, a winner, where under moderate pressure, someone else may take that same actions and behavior as being demanding, egotistical, aggressive, nervy. In extreme pressure, they might even see it as abrasive or opinionated, controlling. And so you're like, well, boy, am I really like that? But I think all of us have had experiences where somebody said, wow, you sure were X. Or somebody else tells you third party, they said that you were, really rude or whatever, or angry about something. And it's like, where did they get that from? Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, have you had anyone interpret you as these ways, and at first you were like taken aback, like how could they possibly
I'm sure there have been plenty of people who have thought these things. I don't know if I've been told to my face many times. Probably very few times, but that's likely in correlation with the behavior patterns of the person that might think those things. Is someone who's all of these things that I'm looking at as far as myself is concerned, we're the first one where if we spot someone, let's say under extreme pressure that's being abrasive or controlling in our direction, we're the kind of individual that's going to tell them.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, I think a lot of the other behavioral characteristics or other profiles or other ways that people interact, a lot of the people that might see us as abrasive, controlling, opinionated, or demanding and aggressive in moderate to extreme pressure, they're not necessarily the ones that are going to look us in our face and say it.
Correct.
In fact, if anything, maybe they're going to say it behind the scenes.
So how would you interpret that then? How would you look for that? That's important to say that, because you're right. They may not. So we've got to kind of recognize that from a body language standpoint or maybe a feedback standpoint. So how do we kind of counteract that once the pressure's all gone away?
I would say it would probably be two-sided, in my opinion. One would be body language, obviously. I think body language, to me personally, body language tells me more about a person necessarily than the words coming out of their mouths in a lot of circumstances. So especially when I know that maybe I'm getting a little heated or we're under, extreme pressure and I'm getting in that headspace, I can tell when there's people in the crowd that are, or people maybe in the group that we're trying to make a decision or we're trying to get through that, I can usually tell which people are, they're hanging their heads, they're diverting eye contact, they're not willing to look in my direction, or, some of them, maybe others that are more like myself, they're the ones that are maybe, they're swearing at me or they're, saying, hey, why don't you calm down or why don't you cool it? So really just observing their body language and their response.
And I think in that environment too, stopping once it's done, and then because a high S and a high C sometimes can be seen as disconnected or not really listen, not really, but not being interested, but they are listening. They're just not, they have to be asked for their feedback more. I do. Just because someone is quiet doesn't necessarily mean they aren't really listening. I do think sometimes once that's done is having that opportunity to say, okay, look, y'all know where I stand, and then give them permission, if you will, for the feedback on that is something to be aware of, because they aren't as confident as just giving that feedback, and because nobody pushes back, we just assume everything's okay, because we would push back, to your point, we would push back if it's not okay.
Right.
Where there's many that won't, so you do, if you, it's a good thing to be able to go back and give permission or pull that information out, because often they have some really, really valuable things to offer on our board settings. Often we have folks that are like that on the board, and they might not just jump in, but then at the end when I am able to say, okay, I'm sure you've got something to add or engage here, it ends up being the best thing out of the whole group, but they wouldn't have just necessarily always volunteered it.
Right.
So that's something to keep in mind there too. But now I love on 14, we're going to look at the descriptors. And this, I love, we got the dominance, the influence, the steadiness, the compliance, all the way across there. You see at the top of somebody that has a high D like yourself, the characteristics are driving, ambitious, pioneering, strong-willed, determined, competitive, decisive, and venturesome. Those are all things you're comfortable with, and that is you. What's also somebody that is a low D, what might be peaceful, modest, agreeable, cautious. Often high C's or low D's, so to speak. But in that case, yours, that's your main. And in the I, optimistic and trusting is where you fall in that descriptor area. Somebody that is a high I, again, inspiring, magnetic, enthusiastic, persuasive, but they just love to talk and love being in a room. They like everybody to like them. High D doesn't necessarily care if everybody likes them. But that optimistic and trusting, is a wonderful trait, even though sometimes you may not express that directly to folks, but that's also something to be very self-aware of. Because there's two sides of the coin. There's some people that just automatically trust people until they give them a reason not to. And then there's others that don't trust anybody until they give them a reason to trust them. And, you know, I think I don't think there's a right and wrong there, but I do think that knowing that that's a natural trait of yours, it's just good to be aware of that. But optimism and trusting can be a real valuable tool. But are there times to where maybe you could have looked in and asked or done a little bit more and seen some things maybe you didn't see at first?
Right. I would certainly say I'm trusting on the latter.
Yeah.
I'm not keen to trust until you've given me a reason.
Well, that's interesting on your eye there where you were, so you really would see yourself as more reflective as opposed to automatically.
Well, it's interesting because it really, I guess, it could really fall under trusting, because once you've earned that trust from me, once you have earned my trust, my loyalty, it's much harder to shake that. So I would say that I do lean in that direction, and it's harder for me to do other things in relation to that. But
on the S part of the scale, the steadiness, you're a low S, a really low S. But all going at mobile, you like being active, restless, impatient, pressure-oriented, eager, flexible, where somebody on the high S is relaxed, maybe passive, patient, very patient, possessive, predictable, consistent. And, you know, the good news is you want that balance of folks on a team. You want that of opinions where you can get that. Now on the C, you're just a little bit above the line there, and being as diplomatic, which is interesting. How do you think that plays out in the past and in what you're doing now?
I guess as far as maybe some more explanation as far as what they mean by diplomatic, is that
and balanced judgment. Well, let's just say, all right, under natural and adaptive, because there's two scores on here. Natural is just what it means, how you are in your natural environment, and adaptive is how you adjust under stress. In your case, the numbers don't change very much. Pretty much what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
You are who you are. Some folks, we see fluctuations. They really make big adjustments in certain areas of how they in a stressful situation. But so, you know, under the procedures and constraints, which would be kind of what the C is reflective of, cold and somewhat open-minded, but aware and sensitive to the implications of not following the rules. He can display balanced judgment in reviewing procedures, but knowing he is doing things well is a key reinforcement for him. You know, in that arena, when you adapt, as Colden shows little discomfort when comparing his basic or natural style to his response in his environment. That's what we just talked about. So you pretty much act the same under stress or not under stress.
Absolutely.
You know, would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so that's good. That's good to know. So we'll skip on over to, this is a big part too that I've tried to get people to like land on, and then we work on, is time wasters. Every profile has a time waster tendencies. So I'm going to read these for our purposes here. Potentially poor delegation, firefighting, lack of a written plan, crisis management, and so would you say that, you know, and we do have plausible causes and possible solutions, but any of those areas, maybe do you think you kind of could use your time better or affect how effectively, you know, does it determine how effectively you use your time?
Lack of a written plan stands out to me immediately.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times I am so quick to kind of charge into something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very, very much, once I've committed to doing something, I am not the person to worry about the finite details. I'm more the person to just run into the situation. Similarly with the fact, if I was, if I was running a marathon, let's say, if I decided I wanted to run a marathon, once I set my mind to the fact that I'm going to run a marathon on a certain date, I'm going to show up and I'm going to run the marathon.
Right.
As far as making sure that, I've done certain things to prepare the morning of, getting there at a certain time, doing certain stretches, I might do those things, but if I don't have them, I'm running the marathon regardless. Right. And a lot of times, if you run a marathon without stretching, you're going to be hurting the next day. So a lot of times I think it burns you a little bit. And just, I think about that with kind of a lack of a written plan as well. For me, when I first launched Blades Marketing out of my parents' basement, there wasn't necessarily, I had a lot of thoughts written down. Right. I was always writing down my thoughts and kind of a bit of a plan as far as how I was going to grow this thing. But at the beginning, I was not caught up in, okay, I need to have a perfect structure for how I'm going to get my first client. It was just, well, I'm starting this agency and I'm going to get my first client. And so I just took to the streets. I kind of, went into the trenches, if you will, and immediately started just executing. And I think maybe had I had a written plan, maybe it would have enabled me to be more consistent. But regardless, it worked. So,
well, I think that aligns with what we've got down here, which I think is great. Basically, some possible causes basically is you're action oriented. Basically, you want to get things done now, which completely aligns with what you just said. That priorities keep changing. Self and other imposed. So why write it down when when it's a moving target, so to speak. And this is really key for a lot of entrepreneurs. I see this in a lot of business owners. I have been successful without a plan in the past. So why the heck do I need one now? As that benefits me now. So want to, quote, go with the flow and not be stifled by a written, daily agenda or some guidepost. And maybe if it's not a daily agenda, so some possible solutions, just write down a personal and job-related, values and prioritize them. I think having a vision, one thing we work on is help people develop their personal vision and make sure it aligns with their business vision. So when decisions are made or things are done, where's my anchor? Where do I go back to? What do I say yes or no to? What if I'm saying yes to this, does it align with really what I am, the path I want to go on? Right. And it doesn't have to be, a 3-ring binder full of stats and figures that nobody ever goes back and forth to. I think in your case, it just would be more, and many folks I work on, is just that having the thinking time. And the reason our boards work and our coaching works, because it makes you at least a couple times a month to just stop and think things through in a different way. You and I have talked, and I know that you have time that you realize it's important just to contemplate things, and you're comfortable that you don't have to be doing, that you're okay with that. So maybe even taking that time and maybe being a little more structured with it, that what you're thinking about, you document some of that and have it go by there. And basically, a long-term plan that supports the values, and we were talking about. But I do think that would be one thing. As for the work, I think for you and I, we can target. Okay, so the next 90 days, let's just kind of put a little outline together that I can. It's kind of my anchor that I go back to, and see if I can see how it affects my productivity.
Absolutely,
and do that. But I do think that what I see a lot is that because you're so determined, you're going to make it happen. And I see a lot of owners work a lot of hours because they are that determined, but they really thinking and redirecting some of that would eliminate that time, just because if most of their time was toward what really is having the biggest impact, some of that could be lessened. All right, I thought that was really good. we won't worry about I think that one area, that we have a little page with areas of improvement. And what we're going to do today is just focus on the disc. I'm not going to worry about getting into the driving forces. But looking at those, is there one thing that jumps out there that says, have a tendency to blank, but if nothing does, that's fine. If something does, we may kind of look at it down the road as what's the way we can move the needle on it just a little bit.
One that really interests me is be impulsive and seek change for change's sake. May change priorities daily. Yep. I think this is
so good. That's about really 90% of the people I work with.
It's very intriguing to me, and it sparks some thought in two directions. One, first and foremost, absolutely fits my profile. Yep. But on the other hand, I would also say that me having that innate thought process is what has led me to the position that I am and enabled me to create and build the things that I've built, because I'm not always just looking for change for the sake of change, but within seeking that change, I'm always looking for change for the better. How can I make something better? A lot of times, am I just banging my head against a wall? Absolutely. But even if it's every once in a while, if you end up, just hitting that right spot and you find something and you say, oh, there is something that I actually can make better. It's a constant, seeking for areas of improvement. And that is what has driven me to where I am, has driven me on the path to being results driven. Because I'm always looking for not just, okay, I have a digital marketing agency and we're getting great results for our clients and it's great. Well, we might be getting results today, or we might even be, for me, it's very extreme. We may even be getting results for our clients this morning. Right. But this evening, I'm going to be wondering, well, are we getting the best results for our clients still?
We could have done nothing all day, but this right here is really, I think, powerful. I've gotten to know you pretty well in our conversations, but one quote that I use to kind of keep myself in check, and a lot of folks I work with, usually your biggest priorities do not scream the loudest. The things that scream the loudest out of sometimes we respond to it because we're a firefighter, we're a charger, we're going to take care of it. But is it, and I see it play out more in, I know if I had 4 more of this type of customer, it would change my business. But 5 days go by and I haven't contacted or had a conversation with somebody that potentially could be one of those. So really, knowing what the priority is, and not that it doesn't leave you plenty of time to do these other things, but I think wrestling with that to say, okay, if my priority is really this, I've got to make sure that I move the needle in this area consistently. Just like with the marketing, consistency is the key. And I think if the priorities are changing, then in all likelihood, you probably really don't have a priority.
Absolutely right.
But that's not something to beat yourself up over. I think it's the very things that allow you to get things done. If you can rechannel that into this, and just set you a chart. I mean, you're an athlete. The value of working out consistently, diet, and all these things. But in all those processes, there are priorities within those things. With this as applying things to your business, can you think of any? You don't have to necessarily say it at this moment, but can you think of something right now? What is your number one priority in your business for the next month? Just has something come top of mind for you?
Absolutely.
Okay, so sitting back and let's talk about a way to, okay, how can we make sure that stays prioritized in the chaos of day to day? then that would be something I think is a big takeaway from this. Kind of lastly, we're going to go over and look at your behavioral hierarchy. And there's 12 areas, and you see the natural and adaptive. There's very little change in yours. Folks can't see this, but the little red bar represents out of, 400,000 or 500,000 of these things. This is kind of 43 was the average score. Your number one is urgency, okay? Right back to keeping my priorities and having a sense of urgency sometimes conflict with each other. So how do I stay with a sense of urgency and also stay focused on my priority? But anything to the left or right of those is below the average median. So obviously on 100, basically the hierarchy is take immediate action. You are 100 on both. So competitive is number 2. Frequent change is number 3. And being versatile. So those are, your top behavioral hierarchies. And, those are, it helps you understand which of these you basically more naturally and most effective in in the world you live in, having a sense of urgency, having things constantly change in the digital marketing environment. So the fact that you enjoy it, you're on top of it, is a real benefit for your customers. So that's a good thing. The next area, and then being versatile as well. The next area kind of, down the marks is interaction, analysis, persistent, and following policy. And you're just under the median on that. But again, you're in an environment where you kind of are creating your own policies, if you will. In an area that was really just super regimented. You could do it, but it would just probably be something that would be more frustrating from time to time. Often some of the best salespeople are the worst in doing reports, but then people-oriented, customer-oriented, organized workplace and consistent just for folks that are doing are kind of the behavioral hierarchies. And so the takeaway from there is that this is not your motivators, but from your behaviors, the thing that shows up in how you respond to things is that you have a really high sense of urgency, which has served you well in your getting your business off the ground and getting results for your customers. Being competitive, not in the sense of I'm going to wipe people out, but I just want to be the best I can be. Would you say, that would be the only thing I would say. How does competitiveness show up in you? Or is you're like, okay, I'm going to show them, or is it more competing with yourself, with your previous more and improving and changing, outperforming, from a result standpoint? So how does that play out and show up in your work?
I would say for me, competitiveness is across the board.
And let me ask you a different way. Do you think it shows up in a positive way in your business, in your work, or do you feel like sometimes you have to fight it from showing up in a negative way?
I'm going to have to say both.
Okay.
I hate to be that guy that falls in the middle there, but I would have to say both, because for me, I'm constantly competitive with myself,
right,
with the man I see in the mirror, who I want to become and being better than I was yesterday. But I am also certainly very innately competitive with other individuals, and it's not always conducive to the environment. So it can be a pickup game of whatever sport. It can be, if there's something, if there's a goal to be accomplished, then I want to be the best.
Yeah.
I want to win.
Yeah. And so in this, so that translates over to your business too.
Hands down.
Yeah.
And I would also say too, on more of the other end of that spectrum as well, though, is I have a very healthy competitive nature, I believe, with friends of mine, with people whom I trust, to push them to be better and to have the expectation that they're going to shove me around and push me to be better. Right. With myself, I would say it is healthy for the business, it's not as healthy for me necessarily, because I will always expect more. And sometimes there are going to be times when you don't have much more to give, but you're demanding more of yourself. So you push through anyways. But then also, if someone outside of my realm of trust, if someone that I would not consider a friend, someone who maybe is someone I'm not too fond of or is not too fond of me, or who has disrespected me in some way, shape, or form, my competitive nature will most certainly, I'll do it in a quiet manner too.
Well, I think on the competitive, one thing that it shows up in business is, in the only cautionary tale that I've seen, is that sometimes we lose sight of the customer's needs and our desire to outcompete someone. And so it's important to not let that cloud, or where we just completely forget to really ask the customer what they're looking for, what they want, or is the results they need really for you, and what you provide best, or would it be, as crazy as it sounds, would it be better? Just like they might really be a better fit for someone else. When I see it play out in the wrong way, it's more of where the customer gets forgotten about in the zeal to compete with other folks. And I don't think that's something that's probably been an area for you, but I think that's recently come to mind in some things I've done that I think it's worth pointing out, that don't let the zeal to compete override what the whole thing is about, is our customers and clients and providing a service. So looking at this on this page with the graphs on 25. So for those watching at home, if you're playing disc bingo, it is you're 93 on the D, you're 58 on an I, and anything over that median is kind of considered, your priority or top area. Then your S is a 7, which is low, and your C is just over the line at 52. That's in your natural. Now, what's interesting in your adaptive, it goes from 93 to 94, basically the same. The I goes from 58 to 42. There's a little fluctuation there, but again, as you noted, you become a little more reserved sometime in a group, and that would reflect that I coming down. S is virtually the same, 7 and 8, and the C is 52 to 45. And those descriptors that we gave there, on that descriptors page, you kind of got an idea of where these fall at. We have a little wheel that shows you on page 27 that kind of where you're in the conductor arena. You're persuading conductor, if you will, and I think that certainly would describe. Other areas would be promoter, relator, supporter, coordinator, analyzer. And as you get groups together, and even as you're working with clients, it's really good to know kind of where they are on this, if you have the ability to, or if they've ever had it done, or if it's somebody you're going to go into a long-term engagement with. It might not be bad to have one of these done, and so you kind of both know where you're at. Where I'm going to do is, for today, I'm going to stop it at the disc analysis before we get into the driving forces, because I think we went through this pretty good. So, coming back to, I see a couple of takeaways. I see that I usually want to come out of these with one or two things we can work on. So my question at the end usually is kind of, what are your takeaways from today? And is there anything in the next 90 days maybe we want to kind of put a target out there and shoot for?
I think one key takeaway is understanding that I do feel positive about my ability to be self-aware of a lot of these things. A lot of these things were really just reinstating the fact to me that of things that I already knew.
Very good.
About myself, some. as far as something I can work on that I know I need to work on, and that I would love to take this report and utilize it as maybe a foundation to do so, is creating maybe more of a, like that priority list in chronological order, or in order of priority. Maybe a list of 10 things.
Yep.
Cross out 8 or 9 of them, and focus 90% of my time on that number 1 and number 2.
Perfect.
So I think that would be something that would work really well for me. As much as I would love to, I have tried it in the past, actually, because I know my tendency to thrive in chaos leads me to
seek.
That's exactly right.
Yes,
So when there's not enough chaos, I will draw it into myself, because that's where I'm able to thrive.
That's really profound and intuitive on your part, because a lot of times owners, I work with folks and we do some things, we accomplish some priorities, and all of a sudden they've got more time than they've had before. And it freaks them out. They don't know what to do with it. And, it's like, my goal is to get things where I can take Friday off. Well, wait a minute. I really can take Friday off, but there's got to be something wrong. Something's not getting done, but, so you're that's really intuitive on your part to go. So we can definitely do that. And, anything else?
Overall, I think that's pretty much the gist. I think, I am very intrigued, as a final note here, the very low S. And, you talked about how that could correlate with, the way I interact in a group setting.
So go back to page 14 and let's look at those descriptors. That'll be a good reference for you. Okay. That low S plays out in flexible, eager, pressure-oriented, impatient, restless.
Yep.
Even though I'm, calm, cool, and relaxed for this particular setting. No, I'm a very low S, and and sometimes I get into this. I'm a very high D and a very high I, and my wife is an extremely high S and a totally 100 C. We couldn't be any more opposite, but it plays out in those things. A high S is going to come across very relaxed. Patient. That's an area, predictable, consistent. Consistent and chaos do not go together. Are we good?
Yes.
Okay. And so out of one of those things on there, just to stretch yourself, and I'm glad you brought that, because often I'll say, pick one of those that are out of that that stretches you a little bit, that maybe would work on. Which one of those kind of resonates on the top, where it says steadiness, that's highlighted as you. Above that, any of those tendencies or traits or things that maybe, I want to stretch myself to be a little more this way, or a little more aware of that in others, and how maybe somebody who are those can help me more. One of those two things.
Consistent.
Okay, perfect.
Consistent for sure.
Isn't it amazing how I run into this a lot with marketing people, because they really know how incredible it is and how valuable it is in marketing programs and marketing in general. The more consistent you are and the more you stay with something, the compound effect builds. But yet, often they have a very hard time, because they're so creative and there's so many things coming up. It's hard to stay consistent in the work activity.
Right. As much as I want to be more consistent in certain facets, I believe you need to be careful in where you integrate these things, because for me to play to my strengths, I am very well suited to thrive in chaos. And if I inject full-on consistency within every facet of life, it will suffocate my natural born ability.
And I wouldn't recommend that. I would say it's just something that if you pick, are you consistent in your workouts?
Oh, absolutely.
Are you consistent in your diet?
Absolutely.
Okay, because you have a real clear path that you're shooting toward. I think the clearer you are in the things you're accomplishing, the easier it is to be consistent and know what to be consistent with, so that it still allows for. Do you use creativity in your workouts?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. You use creativity probably in your diet, but you're consistent
Not
about
in my
what
diet. No,
Okay, all right.
that's
Well,
the
then
one.
I'm out of that. All right. Well, then let's stick with the. But the point is, you get my point. You can have it to where it makes your company and you better, but without taking away who you are. And so, I'm not asking you to be somebody you're not or flip the change. Just like, okay, I think this would help me in this area, in that area. And so we've covered a lot.
Awesome.
These things always go sort of, it's always unique. And it's the first time I've ever done it with a camera in front of me and a microphone. So I might not have been as silly as I sometimes am when I do these things. But, the main thing is I felt like we accomplished some real identifiable things. And anybody listening to this, hopefully you got some takeaways and saw some things for yourself. And if nothing else, whether it's myself or someone else who can help in this capacity, one of the biggest struggles in business is communications, and one of the biggest reasons that happened is folks are not self-aware. And if you can, and then become aware of others, if this is an easy tool to help improve that.
I think you're absolutely right. This has been very interesting to me. Once again, thank you very much for conducting this assessment, for coming in and teaching me a little bit about myself.
Well, you've been very candid. You were very good today. So I think that'll be very helpful to people. You're very much someone that people naturally like, and it's a real strong trait of yours. And I think that transparency that you showed today in doing this only adds to that.
Thank you very much.
Have enjoyed it.
All righty. Well,
Thanks.
Thank you once again. And I guess stay tuned for some more content. And thank you all for those of you that tune in, I guess, to learn a little bit about me.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming on, Lee.
Appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
All right, thanks.